we're gonna get started here just in a couple minutes. So a lot of few drivers just rolling here. I know we got one speaker about 5 minutes later, so but I guess we'll probably get started here. First off, I'd like to welcome everybody to the special meeting of the Paulding County Township Association. Everybody hear me all right? Not Curry? Are we going wrong?
Hold it closer. Hold it closer.
All closer.
Yeah.
I'm on my stand. A little better. Yeah, a little bit. Is this better?
Yeah.
All right. Tonight we're gonna discuss the local entities here are gathered here tonight to discuss the property tax issue. It's a complicated issue. First off, I'd like to state we are not deciding anything on property taxes tonight. We cannot vote on anything. We're not in a meeting of our own entities. Nothing's going to change for the homeowner or property owner tonight. This is purely to inform the local entities, school boards, and EMS and fire services of exactly what's going on at the state house as well as the repeal movement. It's a complicated issue. None of us like to pay for our new taxes. That's all completely. I don't think that one of us can solve this problem either. It's the sales tax issue is just huge to replace this. So right now I'll turn it over to Roy also sign. He's got a lot of experience with the legislation. Where you going up here tonight?
I'm sure Jim sitting over.
I think I want to set the stage by sort of commenting about how we've got here and what I hope comes out of this meeting. Property taxes have evolved over the last 40, 50, and longer years. And the decisions that were made in those last 40 or 50 years, we're not going to change where we are or where we are. We can get upset, we can complain, but guess what? It hasn't changed anything from there backwards. So I hope as we discuss what we have done, where we think we are, and moving forward, I think we have to do it, and since this is Paulding County, we have to do it as being one of the smallest counties in the state. One of the earlier decisions or proposals that come out that did away with inside millage was going to give the ability to raise sales tax 1%. Paulding County is one of 10 or so counties that 1% would not make up the difference. So as we look at the challenges of what should we do moving forward, the significance is different from the size of our county to Cuyahoga and Franklin. And those counties, frankly, they lose their sales tax or lose their property tax. They have the ability to make it up a sales tax. They have other avenues that we just don't have under current law. As we look at some of the proposals that have come forward, I can safely say, Jim and I, when we represent Northwest Ohio, a lot of the proposals that are coming forward do not favor rural areas. So we're going to have to be somewhat, I'm not going to say loud, but I think they have to come up with ideas that will work for us. Ideas that maybe 10 or 12 other counties in the state are in the same position. First of all, I just felt bad. Thank you. Putting this together was, I'm impressed and hopeful for you about saying it correct. Somebody out there has to have the answer. But the think of the chat put together and it has 5 or 6 bills on it. Probably your rest place to put, and then you will. We can talk about these house sales and where they're at. I don't do shit. What me about the David say if you want, and there's someone else tonight who will go down. So, and I would prefer to answer the questions. All these bills, some of these bills have already cast out of the past to the English Senate. I can't speak for the Senate. I just say it to the Sheratons. They'll pass through the Senate. But also, Jesus. So, Union, be more.
My name is Jim Hoots, and I'm currently a state representative, but I represent the 81st House District up by Williams and Fulton and Henry County. In fact, I used to represent this area too, so it's good to be back in Foley. I was also a former county auditor, so the one thing about this issue of property taxes, as Roy mentioned, it's a very complicated issue. To say that, that I know everything about it, I'm still learning. I was an auditor for 13 years. I think county auditor is here tonight. Is she here somewhere? Right to the front row. But it is a very confusing issue. And this is something that we just didn't start talking about, this past year. We've been dealing with this issue, I would say, for 4 to 5 years, which I call it the perfect storm. And I'll give you an idea, because I think the first thing you have to understand to solve this problem, you first have to understand what created this problem that we're dealing with. Because we've been paying property taxes for many, decades. And for some reason right now, it's become a big issue. And I'll share with you why I feel, or what happened these past 5 or 6 years to create this perfect storm. And on the one side, what you had was the pandemic that occurred, back in 2020, around that area. And what happened there? Well, you started to see materials for housing disappear. You started to see lack of housing being created because of, even outside investors coming in and buying up property and buying land, buying homes, at ungodly prices. And then you saw where building the homes increased because of the lack of the materials, which cost more. And then you started seeing sales on homes. And the homes, which you thought were maybe $150,000, were sold, they sold for $250,000 or $300,000. You look at that house and you go, there's no way that house is worth that amount, but it was selling for that. And the way the law is here in the state of Ohio, the way the Constitution says, is that's what the county auditor is required to use to determine what the values are going to be every 3 years. Because every 3 years there's a change in valuation because of a reappraisal or a triennial update. Now, what also makes that very complicated is that the counties aren't on the same cycle in reappraisals. There's 88 counties, 88 ways of doing things, and then you have each cycle, there's like a third of the counties are on the cycle here, and then the next third and the next third. So when we tried to put together legislation, we had to figure out, okay, how is this going to affect, all the counties and all the taxpayers here in the state of Ohio? So on one side, again, you had the valuations just jumped, and they were jumping in the past. You may have seen a jump because of inflation. So maybe you're seeing 3, 4, 5% each year, but these last 5 years, you started seeing increases of 20, 25, 30, 35% increases in what homes were selling for. So you had that part over here. Well, in the 70s, they took care of that when they put in place what they call the 920. And again, this could be a confusing thing if you don't work with it on a daily basis. So what that basically did for voted millage, as the values increase, because when you vote dollars. When you go in and vote on a levy, you're basically saying, I'm allowing this public entity they're going to raise $100,000 for this levy. So you take the value times the millage to get that 100,000. Okay? If the millage went up or the values went up, the millage would go down so that you would still receive that $100,000. So every 3 years, when the values would change, that millage would decrease so that you still receive that $100,000. And that's basically what was happening since the 70s. Well, in the 80s, they also put in place this thing called the 20 mil floor for the schools. And the schools did nothing wrong. I mean, this is what was put in place during that time, but most of the schools weren't at the 20 mil floor. And what that means is when values would go for a school district, let's say a school district has 25 mils of millage. Okay, as values went up, the millage went down. It went down from 25 down to 23. In 3 years, the values went up again, so it went from 23 down to 20. And then you saw this big increase in values these last 4 years or 5 years of 20 or 30, 40%, but the millage stayed at 20 mils. And so that's where you saw this big increase. And again, that's the way it was, and that's what happened and occurred, and that's what you saw during these last 5 years was that big increase in your taxes because of what was happening there. Now, the other issue, and we won't get into it too much tonight, but another issue is the schools. You're also getting state dollars, okay? And there's a balancing act there on what they're getting from the state and what they're getting locally from property taxes. Now, they'll say, you know, and they're correct on it too, the state putting dollars in on the state side hasn't grown as much, and then you see the growth in the local side, but that's where it's going to affect you as taxpayers. And so that's what we're seeing here right now is because of that 20 mil floor where it hit, and that's where you're seeing these big increases at the same time. Now, I might say, and this is another, and as we go through these bills, another issue that occurred because of these increases, you also have not only voted millage, but you have what they call inside millage. And that's where all of you as townships, again, schools, villages, the city of Paulding, if they have for the village of Paulding, where you have the inside village where the 920 did not do anything with the inside millage. You get that full amount. But when those values increased by 30 or 40%, you did see a big increase in your monies that came in because of that inside millage. And so you have that plus everything else going on, and that's why you as a taxpayer, because we're all taxpayers too, we saw it in our bills, and that's why you saw a big increase these last 4 or 5 years, and that's why I say it was the perfect storm that occurred, and that's why you're seeing this happening. At Butler County was, a county down by the Dayton area. They were the first one that really started talking about this issue about 4 years ago or 3 years ago. And so we started looking at it. We put together a property tax committee to look at and make recommendations on what we can do. And a lot of this legislation that we put in place that we'll talk about later are some of the ideas that came from that, that committee. Once we put that in, then the governor also had a committee that he put together to deal with that, because I really believe that there's got to be some changes in property taxes. Now, do I feel the change should be getting rid of it? No, I don't think. I think that's too drastic. But I can tell you that this is a very frustrating issue out there for taxpayers. Again, we're all taxpayers, and I believe it's become a kitchen table issue. And what I mean by that is everybody's talking about it. And so we have to do something with it. But I think tonight, and I think this is great timing for this meeting, to talk about the impact that could happen if this thing would get placed on the ballot, and then what is it going to do? What are the services, because a lot of this stuff, because of the property taxes, the services that you're able to do because of those revenues. Why property taxes? Well, I believe the thing with property taxes has been going on for many years, because it's a tax that's basically, you kind of know what the results are going to be. It's like, you're taxing your buildings, you're taxing your land, and it's not going anywhere. It's staying right there. And so you're pretty sure on what you're going to receive based on that. And so that's the reason why I think property taxes are such an important issue, because of what it can do and what you're able to get from that, the benefits that you get from collecting the property taxes. The problem is, the challenge is when it started spiking. And in these last 5 years, property taxes just spiked because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. And so those are the kind of things that we're trying to deal with down here in Columbus right now with some of the bills. You have House Bill 186 and then some of these other bills that we're trying to figure out so that those spikes disappear, so you don't see those spikes in the future. So I'll stop right there. If anybody has any questions right now with this thing. So I guess I'm saying is don't feel like, man, this stuff is above my head, because it's a very confusing issue, and that's why it's so important to really try to understand what's going on with this thing, because this will have a big impact on all of us in the state of Ohio. Because the one thing about property taxes, it's all local. It's about $24 billion that stays local. None of it goes to Columbus, and you don't want it going to Columbus. You want it to stay here locally. And so if this thing would pass next year, it basically will take away all the local revenue that you are receiving right now. But we do need to do something because of these spikes and what's happening here. So, I see that. So, go ahead. I'll come back. You stay there.
Yep. Should we just go through these and maybe give a simple explanation? I'll take EDs or then take apartments. How so long kind of before they flip the strip? And this bill basically gives more power to the locals. Some auditors like it, some auditors don't like it, and Fadia was freaking out if I say this incorrectly, thank you. In prior years, and I can remember having these discussions with Fadia, they would get the appraisals, send it for the state, and they would send the any future back to us. And I think distinctly remember Fadia going back where the constituents of Paulding County saying, "Speak back, that's not reasonable." They would make some adjustments, some. One of the things that we had occurred, for example, if you had a housing development and you had a host of houses that were built, let's say in 1975, and the house sold for $150,000, but it was due for a remodel. If the person that bought it put in another $100,000, brought this house up to current trends, and then we sold the house, the appraisals would look at all the houses in that subdivision and say, well, if that one house here worth 250,000, now circumvent the other house you are. That's just one example of what could happen. The auditor has that ability to say, with this bill, look, that house is not worth 250,000. It was built in the same time period, but it's never been upfitted. So it gives the ability back to the auditor. They're going to know their residents, they're going to know the area better than anyone sitting behind a desk who calls. So that's what House Bill 120 core did. It has passed out of the House and is over to the Senate.
Not talk about 129.
Yeah, 129, basically, when I talk about the 20 mil floor, there's different levies out there that are passed with the schools. And that includes not only operating levies, but also they call it emergency levies are also passed. And what this bill does is that right now, an emergency levy isn't counted towards the 20 mil floor. And so what this does is basically take some of these levies and puts them over under the 20 mil floor levy. So you could have, you have your inside millage, let's say it's 5 mils, then you have a bunch of operating levies that passed over the years. And so that jumps it from, from the, let's say 2 mils of inside millage, and all these operating levies that maybe jump up to 20 mil or 22 mils, and then you have an emergency levy that's 3.4. Well, as I said, when values went up and that millage went down to 20 mils, it doesn't drop anymore, but if you include the emergency levy, that would put it up and keep it above the 20 mil floor. So basically, it's just putting all the levies under the 20 mil floor. Now you have bond issues and PI would still be outside the 20 mil floor. So how many are confused already with this? I just say it's just confusing with this, but that's what that bill would do to try to keep the schools from hitting that 20 mil floor. We've talked to superintendents about that because I think they understand too the issues that are going on as far as with school funding. The next one, House Bill 186, is a bill that I introduced, and that's over in the Senate right now, past the House. But basically what that does, right now we have close to over 400 and some districts that are at that 20 mil floor. Now remember, as values go up, that 20 mil floor, that 20 mil floor stays right there. So with any of the schools that are at the 20 mil floor, starting in the next appraisal, what will happen is we put in a formula that shows that if it spikes up to like 40%, the values increase, because of sales that occurred in the county. And if it's 30-40%, but inflation is only at 11%, the difference between that inflation of 11% and what the value on the home show at 30%, you'll get a difference here. You'll get an actual credit on your tax bill for that. And that's what this 186 will do, is it basically will take out the spikes that occur when you're dealing with property taxes. Now, the thing with the 186, because of the timing of this bill, you're not going to see the effect until mid next year. Again, we have to pass this thing out of the Senate, and the governor's going to have to sign it. But the effect you're going to see in June, July era, and so that's where we appreciate the auditor and the treasurer, because they're going to have to deal with that issue next year. But because of how the system works and how the process works, you're going to see that effect next year. And basically, by us passing this, we figure that the taxpayers here in the state of Ohio, we as taxpayers, are going to pay about $1.7 billion less in property taxes compared to if we did nothing. And so you're not going to see those spikes going on in the future. We feel that's very important. In fact, if we would have done this, back in 2020 during the pandemic, you wouldn't have seen, we wouldn't be here tonight and dealing with this issue. We would have had the foresight to see the crystal ball on what was happening.
House Bill 309 is another one with passed side of the house. One of the things that when we look at the big picture, and I'm talking about the big picture, economic development, retaining jobs, bringing jobs to Ohio, one of the things that Ohio does very poorly on is across the state of Ohio, there are 6,500 entities that can levy a tax. When you have that many entities that can levy a tax, there is somewhere in the state where some entity or multiple entities are passing taxes or putting levies on the ballot because they can, whether there's a good reason to do it or not. The Budget Commission, which is made up of a county auditor, a treasurer, and a prosecutor, gets to then or clarify some language and gives them the ability to trim levies or say, look, you have a huge carryover, you don't need a levy, but it gives them and clarifies the language and gives them more authority. Some places, they really like this idea. Smaller kinds, I don't know, it had a huge issue. But this is something that puts, once again, more ability back to the locals to trim and affect the police.
And I also want to say with 309, again, being a former county auditor, I think most of you are familiar with the Budget Commission. I know the clerks are, where you had to come in and present your tax budget, to the Budget Commission. And I always felt what this law does, like Roy said, it clarifies it, but that we could always do this to begin with. The key to this thing is making sure that the Budget Commission works with the local taxing districts or the local governments when you look at your millage to see if you need more or you can or to see what you actually need if you can actually cut it. Whether it's a library levy, a school levy, township levy, MRDD board levy, those are all the things that you'll be able to work with the Budget Commission. 335 basically says, I talked to you about the 186 where it's going to be based on the inflation instead of the actual increase in values. If they went up to 35% per year, instead it's going to be based on inflation. What the inflation rate is, which could be 11% or 12%. And we're basically estimating on out, and we've been told that inflation is going to be about that amount. Well, with the inside millage, we're basically using the same process that we're using for 186. Now, I know in the beginning, the word was out there that, and actually House Bill 335 was basically to get rid of inside millage, which I did not support. And I know, Roy, you didn't support it either. If we understood what that would do. And so they went back to sponsors and people working on it went back to the drawing board. And they basically did what we kind of suggested, where it would be based on the same process that we're using for 186, and so that your inside millage, before you would get the full amount, where you'd have the inside millage times value equals this. Well, now that inside millage, it's going to be based on the rate of inflation. So you'll see some increase, but you're not going to see the 30% increase, but you're going to see more on what inflation does with this. And that's what this bill is about. Again, It's a bill that passed the House, and it's over in the Senate in the local government committee. And the one thing is that the chair of that committee, who's a senator from Ashtabula, Ohio, or county, and she's a former county auditor, so she understands the importance of inside millage and then the impact it can have on local entities. Because I know, especially townships, because property taxes are basically your source of income. And so at least when word was out with that we were going to get rid of inside millage, the townships were going, what are we going to do? And so we kind of pulled it back a little bit, and this is what we've come up with the Senate or House Bill 335. Again, it shows that you're not going to see the spikes and you're not going to see the increases in taxes unless the taxpayer decides that they want to, you want to put a levy on the ballot. If you need more revenue beyond the cost of living or the inflation, you're going to have to put a levy on and get the vote of the people to do something like that. And that goes for all the tax amenities, whether it's schools, townships, villages, and or libraries or MRDD boards. Anybody who deals with property taxes or depends on revenue from property taxes, that's what you're going to have to do. We feel that's a fair thing, and that's what we're pushing for here. Hopefully, we get these bills through the Senate.
The somewhat bulk line on the paper caused the frustration of seeing across the 82nd district over 60 lots, 50 of them cast. 5 of the failures were here in Paulding County. One of the counties had 50 levies on metallic and asphalt 15. So is it a problem? Are property taxes a problem? I give it both ways. I had no idea what the makers of the ballot. People way smarter than me say if it makes us to the ballot, passes. If it passes, it affects us rural counties more than anywhere else. The changes of limiting vote to inflation, we're sort of playing hindsight. For one culprit that got us all here tonight, it's inflation. We can follow up COVID dollars. You all were affected by COVID dollars and sunlight, and that was significant in positive inflation. But I don't know if it's right. And probably there's 100 people in here, there's 100 opinions of does it make it to the ballot, and if it does make it to the ballot, it does.
I guess that what I sit there. If you're going to trouble about human, always hear about the windmill line, and that's down here at a different time. And I'm going to entertain that if the tax base isn't there, the windmill money will be there either. Agree connection?
We have asked that question, and that is incorrect from what we can know. The current Hilux payments were a payment in lieu of taxes, and what I was told that is a contractual payment, and we and the candidate any will see that. Of any new development, what is their incentive kill for a new pilot payment? Because they're under property tax. So my understanding is the current pilot payments that are in place will continue. Those in the future probably depends on how big your negotiating skills are as outdated last week.
Correct. It's based on megawatts, times 7,000, and then the commissioners can put another 2,000 on. So I don't know if they're up to 9,000 now, and the 7,000 is split up amongst the local entities based on their millage. So I mean, there's going to have to be some probably changes in the process on how it's going to be, even on current contracts, because you're going to have to figure out what that split will be, on that first 7,000. Yes, sir.
Could anything be done about the unfunded mandates now that the state level of funding for schools has dropped so much? It seems like there's a lot of going to the different school board meetings and asking questions. Unfunded mandates is one of their big expenses.
Well, I think it's something that has to be looked at. One of the things that we've done, and we're looking at a bill in the House, for public schools, some of the things that they have to do that non-public schools don't have to do. And I think we need to look at those type of things, for the schools. You look at transportation issues, which is a big issue for Roy and I, when you hear about what the public schools have to do to help with, transportation. I think there needs to be some changes there. We're working on trying to make those changes. So.
Yeah, okay. That could be the only way if there are some of them. Of course, maybe if there's for, yeah, that's a poor way to do it.
According to that, the Ohio lottery, and that's where it started when all that supposed to go to the schools. Was they did pretend up supposed to go to the schools?
Yeah, everything is going to the schools. That was said to me because that was a constitutional issue. So it is all going to the schools.
However,
Right, both very high. This time I'd like to introduce our OGA representative, Kyle Rooks, Alcott Association, Director of Government Affairs. He's basically the man who tells us what we need to know. Well, I don't know about all that.
How's everybody doing? My name is Kyle Brooks. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs for DOTA. It's a very long, ridiculous title I'm the person that spends a lot of time at the State House, knocking on these fine gentlemen's doors and trying to protect and promote the township form of government. So the OTA is your statewide organization that represents all 1,308 townships in the state of Ohio. And I do all the lobbying for the association. So first, thank you for having me. Really appreciate being able to come up Paulding County. The drive was very dark. And then you guys had to drive down to Columbus, driving from Columbus up here. But again, happy to be here. So property tax, pretty big issue, obviously. And it's very important for repatries. I don't want to reiterate everything that the representatives just said, because then you will fall asleep. But I want to hit on a few items, talk about some bills, just talk about the constitutional amendment, and then kind of overall topic. So townships, obviously, our only source of funding is property tax. Therefore, if property tax goes away, there is a very high potential that so does our form of government. So the OTA is coming up on 100 years of being in existence. Be formed in 1928 because a group of legislators decided to get together and come up with a working group to consolidate forms of government, which they said that they should get rid of townships. It was kind of already mentioned about how many political subdivisions are in our state. And so a group of township officials took a long time to get to Columbus in 1928 and formed the OTA. In my opinion, and I think in the association opinion, we are kind of at that point at the moment with the constitutional amendment. It is potentially, right, the end of our form of government, which, by the way, predates the state form of government. When the Northwest Owens was put together, they formed townships. So every piece of land in the state of Ohio, underneath the city, underneath the county, underneath the school districts, all of it is actually a township in one form or another. And so obviously we would like to still continue to exist. We think that all of you are the closest to the people and the most transparent and the most efficient form of government. So we would like to continue to do our great work and your great work for all of your residents. So we are creatures of statute, which is why my job is pretty important in job security, because everything that we are allowed to do or not allowed to do comes from the Ohio Revised Code. So if I'm trying to think of any provision, anything that you do, the Ohio Revised Code has to explicitly say that you are allowed to do it. Municipalities, villages, even counties a little bit. Ohio is a home rule state. So that what that would mean is they just have inherent abilities to do things. And, so cities are allowed to, levy an income tax or do whatever it is. And the state, generally, there's a lot of things that they can't take away from that. Again, if zoning would be one, or, solar or windmill regulation, on and on and on. If the General Assembly takes their red pen and crosses out a line in Title V in the Ohio Revised Code, you can no longer do it, right? So, which is why advocacy and lobbying is very rare, or the OTA, and has been since, again, 1928. And so I say this because our only revenue source is property tax. So as it was mentioned, $24 billion is collected statewide in property taxes. It is our only form of revenue. We collect statewide $1.75 billion worth of property tax. That equals about 7%. And what amazes me when I look at these numbers is it's 24 billion. We collect 1.75. It is our only source of revenue. Again, school districts, they collect the most. They collect about $15.6 billion, which is 64%. Counties, they collect just over $3 billion. And by the way, they also collect sales tax. So they collect, actually, they had another form of revenue that they collect and still collect property tax. And then municipalities collect about the same as townships do. Again, the 1.75, it's just under that. And they also have the thing called the income tax, right? So all of the services that townships provide for 35% of the population, we do on one source of revenue, and we do it for a lot less than everybody else does. And again, if you want to talk about efficiency, you want to talk about transparency, I believe that we do it the best. The OTA that he said we do it the best. As we just had the November election, if you guys put a fire levy on, whatever it is, a road levy, that money doesn't go to your general fund, and you get to spend it on whatever you want, right? Your funds, your levies are dedicated funds that go directly to the fire department, to the road, to the cemetery, whatever it is. And so therefore, again, the most transparent form of government that is out there. So talk about a few bills, and again, I'm not going to get too deep into them. Obviously, you just heard a lot about them. But the two bills that more than likely will pass this week, the Senate Local Government Committee will pass on Wednesday, both House Bill 335 and House Bill 309. And then they will send it to the Senate floor. We'll see if there's a concurrence vote or a late conference committee shortly after that. As the representative said, House Bill 335 caps inside mills to the rate of inflation for a period of 3 years. The OTA actually supports this. Again, if anyone was looking at inside mills, which is the unvoted portion of property tax, I'm not going to explain inside mills, but nobody really should have been expecting a 40% increase, right, when you're budgeting. If you're expecting a 40% increase in inside mills, then probably doing budgeting incorrectly. Obviously, you receive that money, but it is what it is. But capping it in inside millage will still lower the residents' property taxes, and you will still see an increase, right, because it's at the rate of inflation. So the OTA supports that. The one bill that we do not support, however, which we have provided opponent testimony, which you can read online. You can go to our website. You go to the bill pages website, which is House Bill 309. the real issue for us with the County Budget Commission is the reduction of your voter approved legs. It's more of a philosophical, kind of democratic process. And there has been some good changes. We can admit that there has been some good changes to the bill throughout the process and the 25 hearings that the General Assembly has had on this bill. But we just do not believe that your voters, let's say they approved just this past November, a fire levy for 5 years. The County Budget Commission would look at that, and there is a period of 5 years, but they would look at that and say, I believe that you should not be collecting 5 mills, that you actually should only collect 2. And then even though the voters approved 5, you would then collect 2. And we just believe that, again, kind of the will of the voters, your voters approved it. That's the democratic process way. We just do not believe that a 3-person board should be able to reduce your voter approved millage. And really, they don't need 3 votes. It's not a unanimous decision, so you really only have to, or whoever's complaining about it, only has to convince Keep Equal to vote to reduce that millage. So again, this is an issue that some counties believe they already have the power to, and then other counties have said that they cannot. So this bill just codifies that in law that every county can, so all 88 counties can be a wiki use. But again, we are on record posting this bill. And so, and again, these bills more than likely will pass both chambers probably this week, and then would be sent to the governor for his signature, which we would assume that the governor will sign these bills. And then I'm briefly, obviously, the constitutional amendment. So, the ramifications. As I mentioned, our federal government, honestly, is on the line. With the huge issue with the constitutional amendment is that there is no revenue replacement. So the constitutional amendment says on January 1st, if the amendment passes, property taxes are now illegal or no longer can be collected come January 1 of the following year. We'll put an income tax on that all jurisdictions can do a certain income tax. Or, the sales tax will increase and jurisdictions will receive money for that. It just says property taxes will no longer exist in the state of Ohio. So that would mean after the election, should it get on, the Secretary of State would have some time to certify the ballot results. The General Assembly then would have 6 to 8 weeks to come up with $24 billion that all local entities collect in property tax. Again, as it was already mentioned, Columbus collects 0 property tax dollars. It is all local. To say that this would change the landscape of the state of Ohio, I would say is an understatement. The General Assembly, in my opinion, probably cannot come up with a $24 billion solution in 6 to 8 weeks. Property taxes has been an issue for, it's been brewing, right, for 15, 10, 20 years, right? And it's just kind of coming to a head for the perfect storm, as Representative Poops has mentioned. And so the OTA has been pushing kind of the reform, not repeal, reform property taxes. And as the entity that we only collect property tax, we are saying there needs to be reform. Property taxes are out of hand in a lot of places, in a lot of areas. We do not only see grandma or grandpa or Bob and Betty Bugdye, tax out of their home. We obviously do not want that. But again, when 99% of township levies that passed in November, renewal levies pass, 99% statewide are levies that pass, there seems to be a little disconnect, right? Because you're saying, yes, I want fire, I want EMS, I want my roads paved, I want my roads plowed, I want my cemetery to look nice. All of these issues, which obviously go to your property tax, the property tax bill, there's a bit of an issue or a disconnect. So we at the OTA had taken part of a working group to oppose the constitutional amendment. We're forming a 501c3 to do that. We will know if or not they have enough signatures for the ballot come July. The last numbers that we heard, which could be true, could not be true, were that they have 100,000 signatures. They need just north of 400,000 to put up on the ballot. So they haven't a long way. But again, if you ask the question, do you want to pay zero of property tax? Generally people say, yeah, I don't like taxes, right? Nobody in here would raise their hand if I said, does anybody like to pay taxes, right? Nobody likes that. And so if you have a chance to pay zero, you're probably going to take it. But if you ask the question, would you pay some property tax if that means when you call 911 that a fire engine will show up to your house, right? Would you pay some property tax if you call 911 and the sheriff shows up to your house, right? Because in some counties, in some places, especially rural Ohio, that might not be the case anymore. Then there is, again, $24 billion out there that is collected. That money has to come from somewhere. Unfortunately, Columbus does not have money trees that just hand out money. I've heard use lottery money, windmill, sin tax, what about the rainy day fund? All of this money, it doesn't equal the 24, the math doesn't add up, right? So even if you give the $1.6 billion in the rainy day fund, that doesn't equal 24, and it's only one top, right? So it's just that the money is not there that the state can just give, and then we can continue on with services and all of that from the local side of things. So it is a huge issue, one that is obviously very important for townships, obviously very important for residents. But again, our position is to reform property taxes and not repeal, which we think is very, very important. So that's all that I'm going to say. I'm happy to take any questions now or to talk about it later. I know that the representatives covered a lot, but happy to answer any questions at the moment if anybody has them. Yes, sir.
Now, a couple questions. Economics Development Director here.
Yeah.
What I hear you say that you have things that you would like to promote and be transparent on. How are you getting that out to the state? Why? And then with that, the second thing is we just held an election. We have 32 open seats in the county through villages, DPAs, and townships. And as pretty as all of these folks are, we're not very young. So what is it that we can do from the standpoint of, as you're trying to transmit what this positivity is to be, a justice, not take away, but then also how we can get down to our youth or our 20 to 35-year-olds to talk about the importance of these positions and how that might communicate to back home parents, the grandparents, whatever have you.
Sure. So two questions. One, how do we promote all the, OPA programs, the legislation, all that? The OTA has no shortage of publications that we put out. So we do a legislative order that goes out generally every Friday. We have Township News magazine that goes out every other month. We have a grassroots clippings publication. We started a YouTube channel, which is something I never thought that we would do. That sorry, you already see my base if you watch that. You send out a Township Newsbreak email. We are on a lot of medias, to say the least, promoting information. For the representatives, I make the meetings on a weekly basis. And speaking with them, phone calls, in the hallways. We provide testimony to many bills. So we're very involved in all the goings on. And in the second question, how you get younger generations involved. Yes, our township trustee average age is high, right? Nobody does this job for money. Right? And to say that nobody said, I'm going to become a township trustee and I'm going to give her, right? They do it because they've been in the community for many years. Maybe some in here took these issues that their parents held. Our former president, he replaced his father, who replaced his father, who replaced his father, right? So generally that's, what happens in communities because they live there and they care. We do have some younger trustees and disp officers that have been elected in the last few years at the OTA Winter Conference, which is another huge education session and all that we hold every year. Please come to the Winter Conference, shameless plug. We had an 18-year-old that was a newly elected trustee, just like. So, involvement in government and in the communities, I think, it's harder and harder, right? People have, less and less time, right? But just stressing the importance of it, the OTA, we don't recruit candidates, right, to get involved. It's kind of up to, the trustees, maybe, you take a mentee, right? Somebody that wants to be involved and, invite them to the trustee meeting, whatever it is. All those names help a lot. But we do a scholarship program for high school kids that are going to go to college or a trade school, and that we promote, and hopefully they come back to the community, get back. But I think recruitment for any office it's getting more difficult, or any association work, or CPAs. I think it's getting harder and harder because people have less time, right? So that's just kind of at the ebbs and flows of that potion. And no other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks. I would like to clarify something that Kyle said there. The funding sources for the township, there is a little extra funding there related to fuel connections. Okay, so we get paid by the Albrecht, we had to eat that. So that is by far the second largest part of us source in the township. But our primary is definitely revenue taxes, and it would mainly to repeat the thing that told me press operate. Locally here, we also get a local government fund. That's a small chunk of money, but we use to that. So just want to clarify that. And in our local township, we do this in wind and solar running. So, in the township, that's where we receive that. You are by far one of the ones to see we're at the top of that tier there. It is very helpful. We appreciate that. And obviously not anybody have this. Next, here's like that. Here's you want to say a few words, or you?
I mean, I can speak, but really, we're dependent on what Roy and Jim, the work they're doing. And so we have, at a county level, reviewed what would happen if inside millage went away with like 3.5 mils, and that's 2.7 million. We appropriate property tenant and dies. So that's a pretty substantial part of what we do. I guess I would reiterate what Jim or Roy said. We met last week with the developers of the Grover Hill Tree Wind Farm, and they bought contractually obligated if property taxes went away, those funds would come in. Future new development would be different, but they re-emphasized, that to us. Just a little bit of difference between counties. So when House Bill 335 first was introduced, what they were going to offer to us was a 1% sales tax that you could come $1. We were one of, I believe it was 19 counties that would have fallen very short. So, if property taxes is around 2.7 million, today we collect 7.25. We keep 1.5%, and it's about $3 million. So we were off with 1%. That wouldn't have made us whole. I'll give you a difference then. So Defiance County, they can raise their sales tax 0.5% and you make whole. But sales tax is a much bigger part of what we do. I mean, they are of revenue stream for will have that whole about street. The other thing that I may state, sometimes there's confusing. We don't appropriate the engineer's lodge. That is a different component. I believe, Scott, is the fuel tax and then a minimum distribution from the state is where their revenue is. So we don't support that in the 10 million that we actually appropriate. So that's just kind of briefly. No decisions have been made. We've talked about it as a commissioner group, and so we're here to sort of listen and answer questions.
I think at this time, the director and the auditor make a little presentation. I think everybody's a little nervous about it, so don't throw anything at me. But,
What?
she said, yeah. Look like this stuff.
Well, thank you for coming out tonight. Like Kazal just said, you guys are the grassroots. Everything starts with the townships and funnels up. So thank you for taking your time tonight. William and I are going to talk about property tax. We're not going to go in depth with the House and Senate bills at all. We're kind of giving examples, kind of giving it the basis of why we do what we do and how to get there. We've got handouts that we cast out. Those are on my website, the county's website, the auditor. If you go to the information tab at the top where the information is, the very top is 2025 triennial update. And this handout, also the Department of Taxation guide, is really, it's good, it's very informational. That is there as well, and the big Louis has handout will be on our website. So if you get home and you want to have to, maybe you can pick it up, or if you wanted to look at it again to share that, go to our website and you'll see that. Also with the website, we have tax rates and all kinds of information. If you've not been there, go to the website, pull up your parcel, and we'll get into what your parcel actually shows you on the website too. So don't be afraid to go out there and look and keep digging into what questions you have or want to be the answers to. So, So there are a lot of initiatives out there right now. Representative Hoots never say it is Hoppy said has already talked about that. Our triennial updated to talk about how they calculated, how they're distributed, and what tax that we will have. What triennial update is right now, 25. So the reappraisals are every 6 years, and that's when the appraisers really dig deep into the value of the house. The triennials are every 3 years in between, and those will look at sales. So all of your transfers that are regular sales, that are valid sales, are sent to state of Ohio monthly. I think we send out, and they take all that information and gather all that information, and then they come back to us and they tell us what percentage they want us to increase. So I've heard people think I set those rates. Absolutely not. I do not set those. They are ordered to us from the state. They suggest it, and if I don't do it, they will not approve tax rates, which I did to the treasurer. She takes the tax bills. We gather the money. So if we fight the state, which we could, but it will end up the same way, we will be ordered to take the increase. We met with the state numerous times. A couple of those were not pretty meetings. our appraisal staff, our appraisal company that we, that are vendors that we outsource, fought very hard to get what we have. We have to be within a certain range for them to approve it. And they will not, there's no fighting them. They will court order us. I know years ago, Lucas County did fight them and waited, and they were court ordered, and they had to pay 8. So, yeah, I don't set those averages or those increases. They do come from the state, and every tax district, you can have 28% as our average. You can have a 10% increase or a high 40% increase. The average is 28%. And that's land improvements, meaning homes, buildings, and the CAUV soil rate also went up drastically. And that is completely ordered by the state. So those will be payable in 26, and we don't have approved rates yet. We're working on an IPAD, but we do not have those approved yet from the state. When we do get those, we'll have them on the website, and you can see those. So we're waiting on that to be accrued. As far as the calculation goes, we've got their appraised value versus assessed, the mill. We'll go through those where we're at. Property tax calculation, and part of this is going to be a repeat, but I hope you take these home and look at them later and go over them, you know, as we're sitting at the supper table, like they said, as a discussion, and look at them later and go over them again. So the property tax calculation, the appraised value is your market value, what you're going to sell that for. The assessed value is what we tax on, and that would be 35%. Here's an example. The appraised value is $200,000. You multiply that by 35%. It's a $70,000 assessed value. The millage, a mill is $1,000. So everything's calculated per $1,000 of assessed value. We did want to talk about, Chad had mentioned about levies. Replacement levies are no more. Whatever happened in early, 2 weeks ago, a week ago, would be the last replacement levies that will have. Those will run their course. When those renew, you can't renew the replacement. So that'll be new. Emergency levies are also done. Whatever happened in the number, whatever's on that 5-year, 10-year, Thursday are done now. Additional levies, these are just basically a listing of levies. So the additional is just the new levy. Maybe the fire department needs something with cemeteries. Those are just additional new levies. The renewal levy, same purpose, same amount, just renew it. And those are calculated at the old valuation. A lot of people do the replacement to get the new valuation, you get more money. But the renewal will be same as what you've been collecting. Bond levy is more for construction. I'll put a plug in that too, just for Paulding County. They paid off the jail 2 years ago, and the hospital bond will be paid off next year. So the county itself, jail and hospital, will be paid off. So yay to Paulding County to get that done. Continuing levy, no end date. There's other descriptions there. No end date on that. Operating levy, more for the townships, schools. Permanent levy, more for permanent, construction. A lot of these schools use the permanent improvement levy. So we're going to touch real quick on inside millage. Inside is what we don't vote on. Everybody shares 10 mills. The county has 3.2. The health department has 0.1. So we as a county have 3.3. Your townships have inside millage. The schools had inside umbrage, villages. Outside millage, all of inside, nothing is voted on. That is inside millage. The outside millage are your levies that everyone votes on. Just an example, Paulding Township, general fund, 3.2, health department, 0.1, the school and the township, they're in IQE 6. And that is full rate. None of those are reduction factors on those. So this is back to our example. With $200,000 house, $70,000 assessed value, 3.2 mils for the general fund, divided by 1,000 because of mills. So for every $70,000 home, the general fund, our general fund would get approximately $224. Other levies add into that, your school, your village, your township, and I didn't figure it. Your non-business and owner occupancy credits aren't factored in. I think they figured it would be about $35 less, approximately. So that's just a glimpse of one house, what goes in our general fund. Here's a pie chart. You can see the sales tax, very important to us, almost $3 billion. Property tax, you know, what we would do without that, I don't know. Payment in lieu of taxes is your wind and solar. The gray. The commissioners get the county gets a portion of that. We also get service payments, which UDF is on at the beginning that you negotiate. So that's where we're at our limited funds. Interesting, you see what revenue comes in. Here's our expenditures for the general fund. And insurance, that's health insurance, liability insurance, kind of take into that. The courts with all the courts combined. Community court, common pleas, probate. The sheriff, I did add his SRO, school resource officers, are separated, but for this I added within the DARE officer as well. The commissioners fund, everything that goes there through their office expedient. The jail, they do give a portion of the general fund to the jail on top, in addition to the levy that we pay. Buildings and grounds, prosecutor, or an election, you can see some of those are not mandated. It's their decision if they want to give money for economic development, the park board, DMA. Those are at their discretion and sometimes change. We aren't yearly, but overall, I just wanted to show where your money is spent for the town. That's only the general fund. The 20 mil floor. This is very confusing, and I think we're going to have another speaker that probably will do a better job. But the typical levy, we're going to call it the library levies. Values go up, and the effective rate will come back. They always want to keep a certain amount, what they put that levy on could add. So they want to keep that same constant amount for that type of levy. On the 20 mil floor over here, what happens is when the school's open, when they get to 20 mils of their effective rate, it locks it down. It freezes the levies that make up that 20 mil. So values go up, the effective rate's frozen, your taxes are going to go up. And they're trying to fix that. It's not the school's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way the law is written. So That's a big portion of your taxes. Inside millage, full rate, always, no matter what your value is, full rate and the 20-mil core. So I think with that, any questions for me at this point? Like I said, they're out on the website. Go ahead and look at those. If you have more questions, give me a call, email. But Luan's going to talk about where your money goes.
Much to your guys' dismay, the Fisher's office has nothing to do with property tax except the collection. He had no way of shady budget or anything like that. So I wanted to show you, this is where your money will be. This is for a Madison that in township. Big flashing dollar is $304,000. So as it's broken down, you can see the percentage here, which is where your money goes. Or they say to you, it's not the school's fault, it's just the way the law is written. So that's all the money, all the schools go in everything. And then I also feel that we're kind of like the front line of the real estate taxes because people don't realize until they get that tax bill, they open it up, hey, why not taxes go up so much higher? And everybody's on the talk about real estate taxes then. Well, part of this, it's already too late, and if all these decisions make or not. So, and then one just helps smooth everything out, and then we just send them to Claudia and have her explain to our buddies. Coin road stuff. This is broken down to $1 or not. If you keep $1 of your taxes, and this is where it goes. One school district 65 cents of that $1. Our township is 10 cents. County General Fund it's 9 cents, and that's not for 9 cents. The County General Fund funds all of the branches of in the jump up. So that's mainly right, and I showed that shade. I don't have anything else. Just one mill. I do offer contracts. People that got hobbies paying the real estate taxes. I know taxing going to go up. There's going to be a lot of elderly or young people that want to come in and they cannot afford that first half, second half. I do offer contracts from the 11 contracts to year. So normally I'll just take the 4-year rate, divide it by 11, and then break down and inflate hate split out that. So if anybody has any questions for me? No questions? Great. Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. Please.
Thank you, Luann. And Paul, I think, honestly, that needed to be taught to us all when we first start as an elected official. Most of us villagers, man, look at you. Sometimes our fiscal officers basically tell us we're out of money. We need some more money. Okay, let's put a levy on. That's just a simple thing. If we all look at our own departments, our own entities, whether it's a school district, whether it's a fire department, and that's something we all got to start thinking about is the tax burden on our citizens. I mean, I don't want to pay any more property tax when we come February this next year, but I also like to have the roads paid, like to have our EMS fire supported. Where does it start and stop, though? So, on that, folks, we're going to do the headliner you're facing lands. It's usually a pretty good culture. If you've ever been into one of the cities of it, so I know she has some pretty strong yields on this subject. Talk quite a bit about.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to kind of give a backstory as to why we're here, I think. So we go back to the last Township Association fish fry, fish and chicken fry, right here in this building. We were having that countywide trustees meeting with some fiscal officers. They're always kind enough to invite county elected officials and folks to come to speak to their group if we have anything to say. So at that particular meeting, it was interesting. Our friend Roy wasn't there yet, and I took the microphone. He was somewhere else, and he was coming in hot. And I was given the microphone, and I was on my soapbox with our friends in both chambers down in Columbus, in the Senate and the House, over these tax issues over what I do, where I was told these issues started as in I refer to Missouri. Came to me from the House side of Butler County in our urban settings with schools and replacement levies and how irresponsible they were being and slighted insurers, increasing people's taxes. And it snowballed very, very quickly from my perspective into everybody across the board. So instead of sticking with the schools and the issues that I was told, and again, as I bounce around, I represent Ohio Sheriffs this year across the state as the president of our association. So I've had the ability, the pleasure of meeting every county in the state this year and talk about this issue. So early on in the year, it started out kind of a small pod. It grew a body now really, really quick. This beginning of the year, if you know the year, this issue became just a mess to me. And particularly for me, I've said this many times, but I know I'm repeating myself. Some of you have heard this, but I don't lose sleep often. I've had some really, really long nights, some bad days, some hard days to get up in the morning and come back into work. But I've lost sleep over this issue because we had been preparing as a county that I call about our friends in the commissioner's office from a financial perspective for at least a couple budget cycles for this replacement value. Meaning, as we look at the revenue and expenses in that jail levy, line item, and the carryover, we've been deficit spending that carryover down to get to this year for a replacement levy to anticipate leveling that back off with a potential increase in revenue, of which we will then, in the next 5-year cycle, eventually start deficit spending that down, trying to keep what I say is a responsible carryover. So when our friends in the legislature started talking about taking that ability away, I started to lose a little bit of sleep about that because that levy funds employees' wages and benefits that operates our county jail. So you all have been so kind to support me by majority vote you to the position to help keep you safe and your property safe and the inmates safe, and that takes money. When we get to where we're at today, you look at some of these numbers that you've been presented, when we have the potential to lose $1.7 million, my budget in the general fund is about $2.8 million or some change. My employee salary line item is over probably $1.2, $1.3 million. And then you get into all the benefits that go with that, with PERS and all these other things. I talk about this as being a public safety crisis. This issue, if we use property taxes, you've already heard this, isn't going to affect the majority of the urban cities. They're going to be able to potentially put on an increase in the sales tax if you respond. I think the landmass of Ohio, in my opinion, is rural communities. Our rural communities, specifically our small populated communities like Paulding County and others, I've told folks, you might as well just take the corporation limit signs off of your villages as you come into town. They're going to dissolve. Your services that are funded by property taxes are going to resolve. They're just going to dissolve. If you have no money to pay the people to work, then you don't have any people to do the business. And I think in some terms we're founded on law and order, and you can't fund this. You can't fund the people and employ the people to do those services. Then what the hell do we have left? So I think this is a public safety crisis from my perspective. So I was talking about this as Council Association meeting, and I said, I also believe that our leadership in both chambers in Columbus want to see a lot of consolidation on a local level. Now, these two gentlemen, they're elected to these positions, can agree with me, disagree with me. They might not want to tell you this, they may tell you this. But I was sharing this with the folks in the room, and I said you can see this in some part with county coroners. If you read the news last year, you saw that there was a movement to remove our county coroners in Ohio from an elected position to an appointed position. Now, in Paulding, we can't buy a coroner. Well, as a matter of fact, we had to buy a coroner because we couldn't find one to run, so we had to hire a coroner from out of town to serve our needs. That's kind of becoming a popular issue with coroners. But I think it's much more than that. I think there's folks in Columbus that want to see consolidation of county offices, of potentially auditors and treasurers, maybe clerks, recorders where they fit in. I've not heard that about the county sheriffs at this point, but if you don't have tax revenue for some of our village officials that are here, who's going to police your jurisdictions if you can't hire people and pay people. You're gonna have to contract with the county sheriffs. Now this happens in at least one county in Ohio. It might become a more trendy type of a thing to contract with the sheriff for these services, maybe to do it cheaper, maybe to have better coverage. That's community turn, and I'll talk about it if we get to that point. But that's a huge change for small counties. When you look at your townships potentially consolidate. And when I talk about consolidating, if you consolidate 2 townships, you go from 3 trustees and a fiscal officer, 3 and 3 to maybe 3 and 1 instead of 6 and 2 if we follow it because of consolidated. So it's kind of painting this picture. If you're the Paulding State Great of the State Paulding Police Department, I don't know how many police officers you have, but if you have 6 or 7, because you contracted the sheriff with 4 or 5, and still serve your village and maybe save a little bit of money, go I add or 2 to start those consolidations thoughts. So as I shared this thought or things that I'm hearing around the bio, 8,000 my 3 Roy and real bit behind, and I just finished up about over you on in. Roy's given the microphone. Roy takes over the conversation, and Carnier picks up where I left off without even hearing me speaking in some terms, and started saying things to you trustees that were there that day, like you might want to start thinking about consolidating your services. I leaned against the wall back there by that door and was just kind of processing what I was saying. A lot of these things, we're growing very close in our service to this community together years since we were elected at the same time. And I just sat my curious to Roy tell his friends and family in the room. Well, I kind of sort of just got to telling him. I said, this is real. I'm just telling myself back there, maybe this is how real it is. And I can't imagine how hard that was for Roy. I'm not even talking to him about this since then. What is that? July. I'm not even talking to Roy about that in this. We've had other conversations, but not specifically about this topic. But I thought, for Roy, who serves as the commission, friends and neighbors and family was something to tell you that you should start thinking about potentially consolidating your services, because this is really going to happen. Just reiterates to me what I'm hearing as I cruise around. I think this is a huge deal if we were to lose property taxes in the state of Ohio. It will cripple our rural communities. And I'm on the state. I'm kind of an outspoken local person. I've had the opportunity to speak my mind to anyone who will listen to me about this topic. I'm very, if you're a member of the Valley State Church Association, you see a letter that I penned in our fall magazine. And I said in that magazine that property tax reform is necessary, needs to happen. These folks who crafted a very difficult job to figure that out. But property tax elimination is a puppetator, guys. I just really think it is. So we have to do a goose on the ground work to continue to rebuild through our organization, through the Sheriff's Association. I think all of them as state associations will get behind this movement. I find a lot of goodness after the last election, and Chad and I touched about this a little bit, and Roy and I touched about this a little bit, about some certain things, but we talk about the percentage of which property tax issues pass across Ohio. Roy asked this question a little bit ago. Is it as big of a deal as some outlets are making it to be? If you look at this from the local level, and they talked about property tax dollars staying local, do you agree with me that our citizens pick and choose what they want to support? That this is not necessarily maybe an across the board a blanket issue that needs to be all screwed up with legislation in different committees, where we let our entities, our local people choose what services they want to provide. And by eliminating ways for us to do that could potentially cripple our small counties. So I'm very thankful, I think, for our community that when we looked at the election results, they were overwhelmingly supportive. I know there was some struggling in parts of the community that we all tend to pick each other up in, right? So if there's some needs, we have mutual aid agreements, we have needs, we try to help people when they need help in all kinds of different regards, whether it's townships, law enforcement, police, fire, EMS, they all help each other when you need help, and I think they continue to do that. So I could stand up here all along talk about this stuff. I think Zab's a busy leadership in this. If it wasn't for Zab Ditchnight, we wouldn't be standing here today. His vision for this, when he first emailed it, of us, was let's get together and educate our elected officials across the board in the county on what property taxes are, how they collect it, how the property is assessed, how we do all those things, and then add a few other pieces to it. So I wrote the biggest administrator with this meeting. Take you to leave you there, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, Dixon did a great job of trying to go across the entire topics that we all cover in July. And that July meeting, the next day I talked to my fire chief over here, tank car chief Jesse. About 2 weeks later, I believe they had a county fire chiefs association meeting, and not one other fire chief was aware of this situation about a possible appeal. That same week, I talked to Mayor Lyons over here. She had heard little bits and rumbles about it, but didn't think it was a serious hitting. And, you know, after our conversation, I mean, all us township trustees at this boss that heard that meeting, we were all like, oh my goodness, you know, this is the end here, you know? And it's just eye-opening, to say the least. I'm going to defer this over to Jake Steele. He's the treasurer for Raleigh's Jewish for following executive school.
Good Indiana, the fighting Chess I go the treasurer at all the schools. Some of you might know me better from my Frank users or all yeah. Financial letters, various houses, actually down, you know, do ball schools, but whatever. I'm going to dig into the school funding, the system as a whole. So I hope we can discuss school property taxes and now getting into also the state piece of it. Last time we fired a state and local partnership to fund schools, so the state sets aside money into its budget every 2 years, and local communities have to lump money for property taxes at big classes. And the goal is to ensure that students across the state can have access to a quality education regardless of their day. Lately, though, the burden has shifted more to the local tax side away from the state, and particularly its homeowners exceptionally hard. We're going to dig into the state pieces of the equation for funding first. The state's funding formula is based on a school district's wealth, so they will look at property values and resident incomes. They'll also factor the number of students and student-specific needs. And that's what they'll come up with their number to fund school districts for classroom instruction, building administration, instructional support, and history administration. And that covers everything from classroom supplies, teacher salaries, buses, custodians, everything. So the inputs in the scope and the state's funding formula, they have property evaluations, income, resident income, and base cost ADM, that's our STUI count. Those three factors have been updated every year. You get down to the base cost inputs. Those have stayed frozen at fiscal year 2022 levels from 2024 through 2027. And what that's done to state share is it's significantly decreased state funding for schools. It has forced more districts onto what's called the guarantee, which is mostly a failure of the school funding formula. So in order to counterbalance the uneven funding, the state would have to update the local capacity inputs, particularly the base cost of rates. In the most recent biennial budget, the state did not make those updates. So how it works, since the state has not updated all components to follow the same fiscal year, most districts, or more and more districts are receiving just a 10% minimum. And as the state share declines, it shifts more of the school funding burden onto local communities. And where local communities don't support their schools, it's really the students that are doing that to these. So I don't think we touched on the developer ruling that was in 1998. The Guys Supreme Court came through and said, hey, the state is not the constitutional obligation to do sufficient without schools. 1 year following from the ruling, the state share percentage was 45.7%. In fiscal year 2024, when base costs were updated, it jumped about 3%.
from 23 to 24. Where we are now with fiscal year 2026, we're now at a third of 5%. And that trend is expected to continue down. Another interesting piece is that in House Bill 96, the biennial budget bill, the state has an income tax cut for Ohio, Missouri, whether they're about $1. And what that's done is it's simplifying, so the state has fewer resources as they can allocate to all services, including schools. And that amounted to a $1.5 billion reduction in what the state's able to allocate. Jumping into the local side, global share is it's from a taxpayer used derivative. So the district state share percentage is a piece of what voters are how we consider as it decided by Act to and they're going to look at the educational services and programming the school has, and it drives to new one. But schools do have a limited options to raise funds. We have priority taxes and we have income taxes. And every tax dollar we receive is improved by the owners. So the state's share of funding for K-12 has declined for decades. And that's pushed more and more of the funding costs onto the bowl of taxpayers. And now homeowners carry 67.5% of all school property taxes, compared to 46% in 1994. The business share has dropped, and that's shifted more of the burden onto things. So the impact here is the families are paying more in taxes, but they're not able to enjoy any benefits for additional education households for their children attending schools. This slide underscores the Class 1 share of property taxes. Class 1 is your residential and agricultural. In 1975, Class 1 made up 46.1% of school district property taxes, and in 2023, that number became 67.5%. It's really pushed the burden onto our local taxpayers. You can see just down there that last sentence, residential taxpayer now carrying nearly 3/4 of the last school property tax burden compared to less than half in the 1970s. This slide you've already touched on a little bit with some of the past speakers. It discusses Ohio's tax levy law. I'm going to skip to what those pieces do. So the state law prevents the total effective vote for school districts from dropping below 20 votes. So your voted millage could be 30 yes, but you're not collecting 30 yes, you're collecting 20. If you're on the 20-year floor, your quality is on 20. So a 20-year floor actually serves as the minimum local share required that the state taxes. Once the district reaches the 20-year floor, those houses will name 20 become sheep factors for water supply. So like you said before, as I donations go up, property tax bills will go up too. This scatter plot shows some of the reappraisal rates. Most of them fell between -5% during the Great Recession and positive 10%. As you get further out towards that 2020 to 2025 range, that doesn't go all the way up to current, but you can see that one lonely dot up there, 40%. That's where we were at. So this is really, these are uncommon times. This is an outlier. This is not a historical norm. But for schools that are on the 20-week floor, when you had those valuation increases, you're going to see property tax pull up there too. So this data shows how many schools were on the Class 1, Class 2, 20-week floors each year. And you can see in 2008, before the financial crisis hit, you got about 299 businesses on the 20-week floor for Class 4, which is your special. Coming out of the Great Recession in 2013, that was 150. And once we get out to 2023, that numbers are down to 409. So there's a lot more schools. That's how 2/3 of Ohio schools that they're on the 20-week floor, and you're experiencing those valuation increases directly impacting property tax bills. So why are we feeling this property tax pressure now? The Ohio Education Policy Institute did a study on the analysis of residential property taxes in Ohio, and what they found is a lot of bureaucracy. Home values are skyrocketing. Wage growth has been exceptionally slow, so homeowners are not, their wages are not keeping up with the cost of degree, and it's making the taxes more difficult to afford. The state funding shift has pushed more to burden onto local families, and House Bill 920 reduction factors have led to levy fatigue, I think Sheriff Billy discussed on it where once he passes through landing like that surplus, so kind of had great point is just to suspend until he passes the UL. Most school districts are on that same level side. Paulding's been fortunate. We've done 24 since I think 1991 for the last continuing way, and we've been pretty steady since that. So a quick timeline of factors that have led to that shift. In 1971, Ohio passed their first state income tax during a period of high inflation, high valuation increases for property taxes, and they used that income tax amount to fund property tax relief. We consider that chronic tax credits. And in 1976, House Bill 920 limited tax growth, drawing the rising valuations, and it froze local revenue growth for property taxes. In 1977, they passed the point with floor that said that minimum local school funding now. And then you skip ahead to 2005, tangible personal property taxes repeal began in 2011. It was accelerated in 2013. Property tax rollback reimbursements from the state were eliminated. So any new property taxes became an effective increase on levels because now 1 mil didn't bring in what it used to when the state reimbursed those credits, but they passed an extra sort of one. In 2021, the Fair School Lending Plan phase-in started and it ties state and local input capacity measures, but only half of the level was updated, and that continued to shift the school lending curve down to families. In 2024, the Power Clean had tax cuts for the role for funding. And then from 2013 through 2025, the state has gradually reduced income taxes on the state over tax. That's really just reduced their ability to fund schools the way they had on the bill. So in the biennium budget, there were some missed opportunities. I thought I found some. Private schools received $1.1 billion as subsidies. And then the $1.5 billion that went to property or income tax cuts for the steroids. Had they instead chose to fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan, rather than the formula used now, they would have $1.45 billion left over to fund property tax referral. What would that mean for Call-A schools specifically? We get $4 million per year state of revenue, more than we receive today. We have the financial means to weather property tax reform measures, and we would have no financial need for the current through night and badly better. So here you can see in 1975 the total business property percent of taxes. It was 53.9% in 1975, and it's dropped all the way down to 32.5% as of 20. A few key statistics just to remember it. So I touched on it earlier, 67.5% school property taxes are now paid by homeowners. The state share of B-12 funding is spelled nationally. We had them 35th. In 2002, we've fallen 10 spots to 45th in 2020. There is an income capacity gap. Ohioans, on average, were about 12% below the national average on a personal income. And there's $26.6 billion of baited property. That's typically business property where you captive babies. And that's up from $5.7 billion in 2004. And that's continued to shift more of the property tax burden onto polluters. So why reform matters, I think we're all the same page. Reform is going to be better for people. But what's a peace of mind? Families, especially seniors and veterans, need. Schools need stable funding to continue to serve students. County agency trust state stable funding continue to provide their safety services, among other things. Repeal is going to cause chaos. Either it's going to be public safety issues and public education issues. But reform can provide balance. Things to keep in mind for reform. You want to do this with fairness in mind, right? Tying relief to income to protect serious metrics to keep them in their homes. We do need stability to keep schools, counties, and buildings funded. We especially don't want students' education being disrupted. I heard a number of people say it's not the school's fault. I'd say it's not the student's fault either. We need flexibility to give local districts better tools, and we need to balance protecting the taxpayers, but also preserving opportunities for our students. So policy options, I don't think any of these options are in the bills that the House have passed yet. So I'm hopeful that somebody to go through. But a state-funded homestead expansion could keep seniors in their homes and keep schools funded. An income-based circuit breaker could provide relief where it's needed the most. And having local tools like a voter-accrued homestead expansion or a study or moratorium with tax abatements could help kind of right the ship and spread some of that burden more evenly. Paulding specifically, what this could mean for our community or just for Paulding schools, our state share of funding is 51%. 51% of our revenue comes from the state. Local taxpayers providing 44% of our total revenue.
Property taxes make up 28% of the total. So repeal would be devastating for some minister. You're talking almost a third of our opportunity. Paulding is of the 20 LQ. So it has these valuation increases and there's many increases to the property tax bill. Our most recent continuing operating levy was passed in 1991. We've had an emergency levy that's been renewed every 5 years since 1988. Other than that, we've had OFCC construction levies, right? There's a bond levy and then half fuel maintenance levy. Those both expired in 2023. So excluding those and the emergency levy, we've had the same levies in place, so for about 35 years. Our school district's cash balance policy requires 93 days cash, which is just to say, hey, if we receive $0, like we could pay your bills for 90 days. That just promotes financial stability. Our cash balance now is 110 days cash, so we're getting close to that floor. The district does have a 5-year forecast for general fund operations. We have a strategic curve improvement plan, and we have a 20-year capital plan. And those all together in detail the long-term needs of the district and the resources of the district. And currently, we are at a deficit for both operating and perimeter. All that's to say is that Paulding School specifically does not have the financial means to just absorb property tax for door and maintain our current levels of service. So, why this matters, this is going to be a community outreach piece. I think we're all on the same page. That we do need to kind of get the word out a little more. Schools depend on property taxes for December. It pays for the basics, teachers, classrooms, buses. High tax bills don't mean that school districts are overspending. It just means that there's been a shift in just them paying how much. And we're leaning reforms that protect the taxpayers without disrupting the farm. Any questions?
Thank you. Next up, Pastor Oakley's Fire Chief Lester speak to the effect on fire EMS side. What he may see if something would happen from their property tax area.
If I scale a little, so different here though this is in the back, so give me a second to adjust. I don't have any fancy slide just for you. What I can say is there are 8 departments in Paulding County, 6 of those run EMS agencies as well. Out of those, we are majority funded off of property tax. We do get some fundraising money in. If we had to cut our budget today to 0 on property tax, I would need to have a pancake and sausage breakfast about every 5 days to maintain. And that's if everyone shows up to our normal ones. That doesn't count for the other 7 departments in our county that also make you fund it. There is an opportunity to consolidate possibly, especially on some fronts that are receiving property tax money. However, for the fire departments, what does that mean? We can go under one roof as far as administration goes, but our administrative costs are small compared to other departments that are running off the same funds. It's a small percentage of our operating budget. There's certain things in our operating budget that we have to do. Things that the state says, things that the National Fire Protection Agency says. There's equipment that we have to replace on a yearly cycle or a 10-year cycle. It doesn't matter if it's used once, doesn't matter if it's set in a box, it has an expiration date. Those pieces of equipment are some of the most expensive pieces of equipment we use. The annual testing of our equipment to make sure it's up to snuff is something that eats a lot of our budget as well. Some of the different ways we've gone about it and talked about it. Some counties have done districting instead of having a township driven. They've gone to a broader spectrum. However, what they've done with that sometimes calls closing departments, closing houses, moving them to a different location. Think how close you are to your local department now. Think how long it takes everyone to respond. Double that response time. I don't think there's too many people in this room that haven't met somebody that's called on the EMS or fire department over the years. What's 5 minutes worth to you? What's 10 minutes to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think we all can agree that fire EMS is something we don't want to get rid of. And the problem is it is a very expensive thing. But next up, we've got the Oakwood Mayor Josh Duslat. Thank you.
I'm gonna kind of piggyback on with what some of these people talked about. Wants to do fight. I'm gonna make your status aside. You know, show what you're right. Oh, things will say. The village road board, we have fire race EMS. We rely on our local government one property tax. Some of the small taxes that we get, like tree tax. That's up right there. When we start talking about that, it is a huge detriment to us. I'm not gonna go over a lot of these hospital things you guys want, and like I'll still we go to one. What that was is including multiple property tax form does, and that's not on the sheet. What House Bill 331 is, it creates a new statute one route of a 10-year review for village facilities. So this is in 2024 for 2024 to 2025. This also here basically spells out for me. This is those, and I also in check for stuff. In both these gentlemen here, where I'm done, you know, they're great. They are our representatives for us. They feel the same. That's when the review. I was done at in public news County in July, talking to you, and some of the ones that were down in the Columbus area that they don't know what we do up in Paulding County. You know, we're 18,000 Paulding County. There were some townships that are that size in that area. We start talking about, you know, learning from a county-driven fire being us. What does that response time look like? Getting out to Oakland, getting out to, you know, Grover Hill, or stuff like that. You know, the state income tax reductions, there's stages to credits. The state budget and subsequently the formative bills reduced by the Canadian tax. You know, that's great. The forward state revenue reduced the distribution of tax orders at the state level, but it doesn't, even though it gave relief to the taxpayers, it didn't give relief to consumers. We have to really be, you know, full thinking on us, getting problem on us. If everybody relies on these sets, you're going to see some of these local municipalities dissolve. And then what's that mean? The townships that are already considered, they're going to have a more, you know, spending your budget. They're going to start with me, and over me, and just going to get worse from there. What I want to also kind of hit on is we have office for military municipalities. We'll have municipal. That's who I heavily rely on being such an our information for. You know, when you see things that you don't feel right for your constituents, get out your lobbyists. They get with us. You know, we can customer here, the OGs. I just feel that we all have to be vocal, and I think we all care about Paulding County because I just really live here. So that's really all I got.
Thank you very much, guys. As the clerk can understand, this is a big issue. I don't think, you know, township trustees and fiscal officers, you know, elected village or elected village members are going to figure this out. Obviously, we rely on these two guys right here for
the representation for Paulding County.
Well, we might have a couple things to say, and then take you some old coast here.
It has sounds, and I could not for me, Jason, but I keep saying it into concept meeting to spare you up, but I wanted you to know what the reality was and what is being talked about. And I want to add a couple of things as I listen. What do I hear? There's a bill coming that there are 360 townships in the state of the population of 5,000. There's going to be a bill to oppose that would probably say me township over 5,000 can change to a city, which gives them additional tax opportunities. Only context and pull of fan for Earth Park. There's another, and I don't talk consolidation, but there is being talked about. And the one I just want to talk about the one that's getting. We have very tall schools. I had 17 school districts, probably all in the top 30% school state. One of the proposals, excuse me, but I did. Every county lost the entire population to be also. Is that something that what Jason said, this is a rural crisis? It is. It will affect rural Ohio more than anywhere else. When you talk about the holiday setup, and I'm not afraid to talk about this would probably be about November, it's already awful whack at our airports. If it gets to the barrel, all of us have to go. We got to make more public law than the PCs. And you buy 80 lots. Let me kind of murders for me is be a bias. Voter turnout counts as a state. So we have to be all costs so high if you look at in March. There is no risk that you vote in Columbus and you vote to get rid of your property taxes. Come and get into your state. Zero. Those babies and time you start to ship and they got I almost just probably a 10 or a quarter kind of mile 11 night. It is insignificant. We kept here. And now the snail on we have to pay attention. We have to talk and not think tell you what's going on and what concern they reach out. Vision is incredible work, but there's a lot of background in it. I just appreciate all your folks to like but voter turnout, you could say like how important it is for higher that makes about to the page. So the argument is teacher you.
Thanks, Dwayne. I guess I just like to reiterate the point you just said about that. 0.5%, 1% That is what is on a lot of the property tax movements websites and their Facebook pages. They're saying, oh, it's going to take another percent. Well, that's true for some areas. It's not true for other areas. And if you get it even by a statewide property tax, they're talking 16 to 18%
They're saying it raised 16% of the end, and they say after 2 years, they have to raise that by the 1 to 2% because of all the lost revenue you would see from the exodus of sales on the 5 being the states of the Arabians. We share large borders. And our folk communities, after that, you go get the worst. I mean, this meeting here, I brought this to the county's attention and suggested it, and they sort of pushed it back at me. It's like, you go ahead, just you do it. You know, they said, yeah, we'll definitely be there. So I definitely think they did a great presentation. But it is a hand grenade that we're throwing here, but you know, politically, it's not a good thing to talk about being in favor of property taxes. I'm not in favor of property taxes. Most people know, whereas we treated last year, come out pretty strongly against it. And I've lost some customers over that. You know, there's probably just people that don't want to talk to me anymore. But to me, it was something that had to be said. So it's just a big issue. Everybody do your research. If you guys want some more information, my email is on the back page of the handout that I prepared. Claudia, and her information is on her website there. She can, anybody that didn't get the sheet from Claudia, you can see it on her website. Is there any questions? I think that everybody's probably issued you out there. It is an important subject, so if we got some questions, we're going to try to limit people's questions. We all maybe a minute or something. We don't want to have to wait to go on for 2 hours. That's too late. Is there any questions for any aperture?
Yeah, you were saying I'm added to believe there is it, and that's a good possibility is, you know, are we being proactive and yet study done or whatever and looking for specific possibilities if it does happen? So we're not behind the 8 ball when it would now.
Them want to talk to that?
I had asked with leadership what was on the day. That on players already is acceptable when
I think one of the issues is, you know, the concern I have with this is when you ask people about the issue that's for getting rid of the property taxes, you ask them, well, what's the answer to that? And I've heard different answers from them where they'll say, well, we don't have that. We'll get to that when the time comes, or the state's going to do it. Well, I can tell you, you know, the state is probably not going to do that. You have to remember, and it was talked about, you know, we lowered the income tax for the state because we want to make the state of Ohio competitive. And you know, I think it was a good thing that we got it down to 2.75%. Now there's some people out there that want to get rid of it completely. And I mean, they will be, okay, how much revenue will that, you know, will you lose? And then what services do you not want? Because when I go for, you know, I always get these questionnaires from groups that say, okay, if you run for something, do you believe in Lord, you know, getting rid of property taxes or income tax, or what do you want to get rid of? And then the second question is, okay, if you said yes to question number 1, what services do you want to get rid of? And that's one thing, is just like all of you, like we as taxpayers, we have to balance our budget. We can't spend more than what we have. And I always say the budget of the state is to educate, medicate, and incarcerate. And those are the big budgets. And I agree with a lot of things you mentioned with school funding that we're going to have to look at, you know, in the next budget. However, there's a lot of other needs out there too when you talk with Medicaid, what the federal government does. I mean, I'm still trying to understand what the big beautiful bill, how that's going to affect the state of Ohio, because that's going to affect us too with, you know, you hear about SNAP, you know, all those type of programs that are out there. I think the key is tonight, I am so thankful, you know, for the invite to come here, because I learned a lot from just hearing people's questions, what was presented. is that we have to continue to talk about this because we're all in this together. You know, besides being an elected official, I'm also a taxpayer. And I mean, the question is, you know, when you're asked, do you want to continue to pay property taxes? Oh yeah, I'd rather not pay, but then we also have to get the message out and, well, what does that actually mean? You know, if we don't pay it, because it was mentioned a lot here, this is really going to affect the rural areas of Ohio. And I mean, that really concerns me, especially the border states. You know, if we started increasing sales tax, just where people are going to go, whether it's that state up north or anybody that state to the west too. Yeah. Oh. But it's very concerning on what we're going to do here. We have to really look at what do we want to do, because I could envision, you know, if we keep the property taxes, we're also going to have to look at how do we make things more efficient. You know, and looking at how townships do things, how schools do things, how the state does things. Yeah. I mean, we have all those things that we have to look at. So there's a lot of things. I think this is at the beginning of what we can do here in Paulding County and the counties across the state, especially in the rural counties, to fight to deal with this issue. So, that's you would add it.
We just have mayors ready at a sort of remodeler and it got careers with to review the content review. I imagine our planning one says people on out says boost. That's I very good deal. Thorax says because I have a very good deal. So right now with that a deer. But you know, I guess about you were associated session there. Holding as it is with having a small years for there is how you and here our you know.
So I wouldn't be pretty much we've been trying to prone for this. So we had talked with some legislators. Here's really three options, right? The townships are able to levy an income tax, not very popular here also. We would be able to receive the sales tax, again, not super popular. What kind of businesses you hack and you cash it. And then with the income tax also, the income tax with the reciprocity, there's a shoe there. You live in the township, you work, so you work somewhere else. Your bank affects there. They would lose that right to the pass in if there's issues there. And honestly, it's if you're a township over 5,000, legislation allows you to incorporate your own city, which in Paulding County you wouldn't have that opportunity, and then otherwise you would dissolve and become the unincorporated part of the county. So those are really the options. The OTA adds and it talks with certain legislators about the appointment of plans, which you don't wait for 6 to 8 weeks to come up with a plan. It should be keep constitutional that you have. So whether it's the income tax or sales tax, we're exploring all kinds of options. We'll see what the bills and the falls on any of those plans.
And a lot of it might be giving that power, that authority to you locally, where it would be the commissioners who deal with that, and that, just be putting the panel to the local map. So, I mean, that's just an option that I know Scott's.
I think everybody here probably believes it's just a good path that would be a fail. That's not a work, right? So, somebody out back to the end now, somebody put a pencil to this. As it things keep rates country or not the country of Ohio, how long will it take for food? And how many dollars will it take? Really? Probably a long side of lots of dollars.
Yeah, I think that's some of the state legislators, or senators, or state house representatives. We need to be available and, express some fears that are some of our own fears. But I had like a couple short, very, very short videos. Sarah's going to play on the screen for us there. This is from Senator Golly. It's just a clips of an interview he gave recently. And I think it'll be very informative to how serious this is.
I raises approximately $30 billion a year at Best Station. It's about $10 billion a year from income tax, about $16 billion a year from sales tax, and the remainder from a number of other smaller taxes. Statewide, there are raised about $22 billion in property taxes. So it may sound like an appealing idea on the surface to eliminate property taxes and then just let the state pick up the tab. I agree for you. The state cannot pick up the tab that big unless people are willing to have their income taxes go up to near 10% and their sales tax go up to about 18%.
You're more so like this for like.
Like to talk about the potential to see a property tax repeal as constitutional amendment on next year's ballot, which might sound good on the surface to a lot of people, but if that were passed, say goodbye to local control. Isn't that what property taxes really exhibit, really represent local control, whether you want to pass a levy for new school buildings or you want to pass a levy for your local library or your local transportation system, because that would do away with a gigantic amount of local control under property taxes, which are really a local issue.
Yeah, exactly. And to put this in perspective, the state of Ohio collects $0 in property taxes. None of that money comes down to Columbus for us. All the money stays in local government's hands to fund your police and fire, to fund your schools, to fund your board of DB, to fund all sorts of local services.
A lot of people like to talk about the potential to see a property tax repeal.
You just burst on.
So biggest found nose on this senator's website here. I think that it really pertains to the situation. And Senator McCauley had a conflict here tonight that he wasn't able to defend, but we were very lucky to have Roy, Jan, and all the rest of our local representatives, along with Kyle Brooks from our RPA representation.
No, I've been silent too long. I'm trying to take a playbook out of Jason Landers, and my friend wanted to speak more and more eloquently, so I'm going to try to channel my inner Jason Landers. I'm a grass tax guy, and I want to know, when I'm talking to local people, where are these local dollars going specifically? I can't find any information that says, here is the breakdown. Roughly 2/3 dose at school. How much where is the rest of the money going? If I have that, I can more effectively speak with people to promote this. So I'd love to get my hands on that information if anybody has it. I see a breakdown in the slides that the auditor and recorder.
You got the diary itself, Claudia's website.
I look, and that was taxes in general, so specific to the property taxes. I'll keep digging and I'll try and find it like it is there.
Yeah, because there's this slide in there.
There was some mention of voter apathy, and if the people saying it's just elections to come out to vote, I worked polls with abortion and marijuana. We're on the ballot like it smelled, showed up. So if this becomes an issue, don't just say, oh, we just sit back because it'll pass bigger and then send up at a pass. It's not guaranteed. So people will turn out for this. The last thing is for the townships and the villages. One thing I've been looking at that hasn't happened in a long time is the commissioners of the engineer can work together for a permissive use paths for some additional monies. No one will love that. It comes from license plate fees, but there are ways to help supplement what we're doing, and I just need to hear from you all offline, outside at the meeting, if that's something you all be interested in supporting. And that's all.
Thanks, Scott. I had a good conversation with Scott Europeans back and talked a little bit about the idea of, okay, what happens if, the state legislature inside the area decides, countership not heard this anymore. I mean, it's a possibility. I know I talked to our neighboring state in Indiana. No one who trustees over at various time. All they're responsible for in Indiana are for cemeteries, zoning, and welfare assistance. So if you can't pay your electric bill what's on, they can help you out. But their total budget is around $38,000, I believe. I assume that doesn't include their salaries. They will have some trustee, and then you got a township council over there. But that is not even close to where we're at on Ohio townships. And I personally believe the Ohio townships are very strong entities. We had a great showing in the townships. We're definitely probably had the most collectively organized group in the county. Yeah, that 10 tops, you mentioned that at a few of our meetings before, that, you know, Mayor's Association maybe has a few communities, but they don't get all the councils and so forth. Yeah. So. Is there any other questions I could be right in the direction?
We just pulled it up on the website. I don't know if Scott, if that's what you're looking for, Lou handled over that. But on the website, pull up many property, and you can see.
And you can click on this individual here, and it'll pull up the actual figure for townships or there.
So that's all specific to your, I mean, this is mine, but to your parcel. It's all under tax bill as well.
But, I mean, it doesn't show you, like, for the entire township or the county. I don't know if that's what Scott's asking for, but your individual house is on. Any other questions? Laura?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, on our mayor's meeting, we did talk about maybe we need to start getting some preliminary studies of what a cost of a regional fire partner redoing the nest look like. You know, we've already done that in aspects for a water system for Paulding, and it was astronomically more costly to do that at just bright at service than building a branded water filthy. So if anybody has interest, you know, I think we would start pulling our heads together and start doing some of our studies to have incentives in place to show how they affect the Ypres County. That may the costs our taxpayers more.
I know I did a new job section chief after here at the fire department a couple of weeks ago, and it basically went to the idea of consolidation of fire departments. There's actually a couple of firefighters on their department that possibly the rules or regulations of consolidating that those firemen in the OSHA firefighter one that's been on here for a long time might not even be able to be a firefighter unless they go through the training in the very gang. So, I mean, the two people that we're talking about ended on their rubber phone years, yeah. I mean, to lose that experience is something that I'm sure they're not the only department of cavalry that's like that. And even through the state, you know, we're in a very, very active new fire volunteers in the state. Our area has been lucky. Some of our townships doing departments, but there's definitely some in our county that are struggling really well. So, any other questions before we adjourn? All right, appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Keep help with kids and tables where we